Welcome to another week of conversation about things that are important to us on the political front, economic front, the social front. Today I want to have a difficult conversation, and it's based on requests that I have received over the last couple of weeks. I want us to talk about taxes. I want us to talk about generally the concept behind the finance bill that has been demonized all over the place. And this is something I want us to try and understand first. Winston Churchill said, there is no such thing as good taxes. And I think the minute you understand that particular concept, then the conversation about the finance bill becomes easier and it goes into context. There is no time any citizen of any country in the world will agree to pay taxes. In fact, a certain Harvard historian called Albert Bushnell said, taxes is a price that civilized nations pay to stay civilized. If you want to understand that, countries that don't have governments don't pay taxes, but they pay extortion fees to criminal gangs. In fact, in any society, you're going to pay a tax of one kind or the other, because if you're not paying taxes to the government, for example, for certain things, you're paying taxes to some criminal organized group that's either providing you with security, or providing you with water, or providing you with garbage collection services. That's the thing. The reality of life is, again by Winston Churchill, the one thing you can be certain about in life is death and taxes. So let's first come from that understanding that for sure we will pay taxes, one way or the other. When it's paid, when it's collected by government, it is called a tax. When there is no government in place, it's collected by some organization, it's called extortion. So taxes, by the very nature, is something that is not given out of a grateful heart, right? Once we understand that there's no such thing as good taxes, then you now can be able to move to the second part of this conversation about why do we pay taxes. Let me use a very simplified example. You live in an estate. Your estate has an estate association, right? And that's common in very many places. The estate association chooses a few of them. Maybe the estate has 100 people, chooses like 10 people, and they become the estate committee. It has a chairman, a treasurer, a secretary, blah, 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 blah. These are the guys who sit down and decide what you contribute as an estate to take care of: 1, common garbage; 2, common roads within the estate; 3, common lights; 4, security, right? And anything else that is common. If you guys have, for those upmarket estates that have swimming pools and clubhouses, those are the places. This estate committee is a very powerful committee in the estate. They're the ones who come and say, if you're not paying taxes, they come and visit you. If you're not paying your contributions, they put your name at the gate. I don't know if you travel in some places and you see they have a blackboard at the gate. They write who this. Then it even reaches a point, if you're not paying security, the guards refuse to open for you the gate. Unatoka kwa gate, unajifungulia, unaingia. They just make it as inconvenient as possible. That is the simplest understanding of what a tax is. The 100 of you who live in that estate contribute whether it's 1,000 shillings or 2,000 or 5,000 shillings and give it to the committee to take care of the common expenses that don't have any specific person. For example, you have street lights within the estate. They don't go to any particular person, but they serve all of you. You have roads within the estate that you've curb road, and you all want curb roads so that the roads look nice and your estate looks really nice. You want your lights to be on throughout the night so that the estate is safe, right? You want to have a very nice security company, you know, guys who have walkie-talkies and dogs and what, so that you feel safe. You must sit down as an estate and pay for those things. Now that donation you give, it is actually not voluntary. It is as equivalent to a tax as you can ever get. So we live in Kenyan nation, which is civilized. And we've decided that we are going to form a government. And we elect people, put them in office, right? And their work is to raise money to pay for the things that are common to us. The roads you use when you're using the dual carriage from Kenol or from Nairobi to Nyeri, or when you're using the road to Mombasa, that common road is nobody's specific cost. It has to be paid for by this committee that the Kenyan estate has chosen to put in place to cover those costs. The costs that we pay is that tax. The difference is that in an estate, you believe, now for example, just think about this for a minute. You are 100 of you in an estate. And the only people who pay that donation are 30, right? 30 of you are paying. And they're expected to pay for common costs that cover all the 100 of you. What you will find is that the 30 people are going to end up paying a lot more money than if all the 100 people were paying. When we think about our Kenyan taxes, first, I've heard some people saying that we are the highest taxed country in the world. That's not true. Ivory Coast pays 60% income tax, right? But we are certainly up there. We have countries like Singapore, Malta, Cyprus that pay really, really very low tax costs. Countries that have extractive economies, where you have oil, I mean, when you go to places like Dubai, you'll find that the citizens of the country don't actually pay any taxes. The people who pay taxes are the people who come to work there, right? So there's a whole fundamental understanding of taxes that we need to have to now be able to actually have a conversation about taxes. The first thing we must all agree is that until we have an extractive economy, meaning that we have got oil, we are selling and getting paid for. And that is what is catering the cost of the country, or diamonds or gold or whatever. And even in those countries where it has those things, now you end up losing your government so that you end up paying those funny people extortion fees. So you pay something. Until we understand that we must pay taxes to be able to coexist as a civilized nation, we are going to keep arguing about taxes. So I want to urge government, there is no way you're going to convince Kenyans that this is a good tax. There is no such thing as a good tax. I think what we need to have a conversation about, and this is what I am starting to hear, the presidency tries to do it a bit, a couple of MPs have tried to do it. I think the focus needs to go into the conversation of what are we going to do with the money we are collecting. Of course, there's a big problem about corruption, but that annoys people. Going back to the example of the Estate Welfare Association, if we collect 2,000 shillings, 100 of us, that is 200,000 shillings a month. And then we don't know where 30,000 of that money goes, we're going to have a problem contributing that money. So the first fight has to be a fight against corruption. The second fight has to be issues of transparency of how that money is spent. But more importantly, for me to agree to contribute 2,000 shillings in an estate, I must first understand where the money is going, right? You can't tell me we have agreed you're going to pay 2,000 bob, and you don't tell me what you're going to do with it. So the conversation that we should be getting from government, from the government communication people, from the members of parliament who support government, is an explanation of what this tax is going to do for the ordinary Kenyan person. Because you see, if we agree that we will never agree on the need to pay taxes, we will never agree to pay taxes voluntarily, then the conversation about whether we should be paying these taxes or not is null and void. We will stop fighting about whether we're going to pay taxes. We'll agree that this is something we pay as a price for how we live, right? Once we agree that, it's a cost. You don't have to like it, but you're going to pay it. Then how you make it easier is by telling me the reason we are having this conversation, the reason we're going to pay these taxes is because we want to do this. I mean, when I hear us complaining about what we're going to pay, sometimes I want to ask, so what do we want to pay, right? We have the army, we have the police, we have rangers, we have KWS, we have nurses, we have doctors, right? These are people. Then we have the public service, a whole 300,000, I think there are 400,000 or more people who are all paid by government. I have always asked this question, who is government? When Jubilee was in government, we had this conversation once because we were talking about taxes as well. I remember being on a media house and we were having a conversation about who government is. We keep talking about, no, but government is stealing our money. Who is government? We have government buildings, as I said last week, we have government buildings, we have government cars, but government is us. It is that committee that we choose. in the estate to run our affairs. That is government, right? So we can't point fingers at government and say that you're taking too much of our money, because that money is coming back to us and all of us are beneficiaries of that money. So in this conversation about the finance bill, my proposal, let's first agree that we are never really going to accept or want to pay taxes. It is never going to be our preferred option. So yeah, we are paying these taxes, but we don't like it. Number one. Number two, let us have a conversation about how many people are paying taxes. We agreed if you have an estate of 100 people, at least 100 people should pay taxes. Kenya has 22 million registered voters. That is 22 million adults, right? It has 7 million registered taxpayers. So let's assume that a third of the registered voters are people in college. So we should have at least 14, 15, 16 million people who pay taxes. If we did, just think about this. If we had 14 million people paying taxes, we would pay half the taxes we pay now for the same amount of money, right? Just using simple mathematics. If 7.4 million people pay this amount of money, to get the same amount of money, if you double the number of people who pay taxes, then you'd half the amount of taxes we pay. So when you meet people who don't pay taxes, that's the reason you're paying more taxes, right? So I guess what the government needs to try and do is create a communications campaign about why we need to get as many people as possible into the tax bracket. Because if we do that, then that is how we can start reducing our taxes. There's no other way we're going to reduce taxes, not for as long as we have the kind of ambitious plans, development plan that we bought from the Kenya Kwanza government. It's a very ambitious development plan. There's no way they're going to deliver that development plan if they don't tax us, right? So can we first agree that this is what we asked for? When we voted in the Kenya Kwanza government, we asked for this because we want that ambitious development record that they promised us. If they're going to deliver it, then they're going to have to ask for taxes from us, right? And I know there's been this conversation as I finish about what happened with Kibaki, what happened with Uhuru, what's happening with Ruto, and what had happened with Moi and Jomo Kenyatta. I think it's important for us to understand. Again, I'll just use a simplified theory. Assume we're running a company. We don't want to beat Moi too much. But the company that President Moi handed over to President Kibaki was nearly going bankrupt, right? Kibaki took a company that was going bankrupt and stabilized it. By the time he was handing over the company to President Uhuru, we had a company that had most probably bank deposits, had a good credit record, had a flow of money. We were being able to live within, to some extent, we lived within our means. Under Moi, we were not, right? Under Kenyatta, an old mzee I met over the weekends told me, under Kenyatta, we actually had money, we'd collect taxes for the next year, the previous year, under Jomo Kenyatta. It went, Moi, I don't know what happened. But by the time he handed over government, we were running out of money. Kibaki took over government, stabilized it. Uhuru took a government that had an amazing financial record, and because of that, built a very ambitious development plan. So he had good books, which he could go and borrow money on, right? He had a good flow of cash. And we saw where that money went. We have an amazing infrastructure development plan that was instituted by President Uhuru Kenyatta. President Ruto has taken up this company that now he has to figure out how to service the debts that puts together the infrastructure that we have, right? And he also wants to develop, to build his own development agenda. What does that mean? We're going to have to pay more money. Or we're going to have more people paying so that we pay less. It's actually as simple as that. So as we have a conversation about the financial bill, everybody who is contributing about that financial bill must first ask themselves whether they're actually contributing to the amount of money that this country is collecting. If you're not contributing, if you're not a deliberate taxpayer, forget about paying taxes on your fuel, on your sugar, those are mass taxes. If you're not deliberately doing, if you're the kind of person who does a business and then does a nil return, and you know you didn't actually do a nil return, you really cannot be out there beating up the finance bill because you're part of the reason we're in this problem. That's it. I told you this is going to be a difficult conversation. Taxes is always a difficult conversation. It's like going to see a doctor, right? But those are the facts, right? And we just have to accept that. So please come and buy chai and mandazi, so that we figure out also how to make our contribution to the national coffers, right? Nyama choma, we still have some of the best nyama choma in town. Our chai and mandazi is flowing very, very well. We have the best pilau in town, and we are very happy to host you. God bless you. God bless Kenya. Asante sana.